Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our final event of day one of our practice forum. I'm so pleased to introduce Excellence in ESG Implementation, Building Trust, Positive Societal Impact, and Competitive Advantage with Adi Ignatius, Editor-in-Chief of Harvard Business Review and our media sponsor for the event, in conversation with Tim Ryan, U.S. Chairman and Senior Partner at PwC. And with that, I will turn it over to Adi.
I assume you can hear me, and if not, you will let me know. So I'm going to have a conversation with Tim Ryan. As Liza said, he is the U.S. Chair and Senior Partner at PwC. He previously served as Vice Chair, and in that role, he was Market Strategy and Stakeholders Leader at PwC, and in that role was responsible for the firm's strategy function and stakeholder relationships, which include investor relations, regulatory affairs, public policy, corporate responsibility, and human capital. So he's well placed to talk about these issues today. So as with the conference overall, we're going to be focusing mainly on the question of the return on sustainability investments. Tim, let's jump right in. The role of business is changing. As you said in an interview recently with Harvard Business Review, the CEO's responsibility still includes the traditional stakeholders, as in shareholders, employees, and customers, but extends much further to society and to communities and to business. So as businesses are taking on more responsibility for societal impacts, what does that shift mean for PwC? And I would say both for you as a company and for your clients.
Yeah, thanks, Adi. And to the audience, just great to be with you today. I hope your day's been good so far. And thank you for engaging on just such an important topic. Adi, to your question, the world has changed, and I personally think it's for the better. I've often said many times, the role of the CEO today is very different than it was 10 years ago. 10 years ago, if a CEO took care of the big three, investors, employees, and customers, things generally went okay. The reality is not only do those three groups have higher expectations, but there are so many other stakeholders. There's the communities that you do business with, there's the policymakers that you interact with, there's your supply chain, and so many other stakeholders that matter. And the reality is companies that are taking care of all of those stakeholders will see better results. For us, we've recognized at PwC, as so many of our clients have, is that business is in a really good position. The recent Edelman survey showed that businesses are trusted more than government. That's a really, really important point for leaders to understand, and we focus on that in a great deal. And with that level of trust comes a great degree of responsibility, a responsibility to not only maintain that trust, but then to deliver on that. And that means that businesses lean in on important issues around ESG, and I'll go, you asked about us. It means we lean in big time on things like diversity inclusion, the responsibility to not only upskill ourselves, but help our clients and our communities around upskilling. And it also means the need to be transparent. I believe we're going into the golden age of transparency. There are no secrets. It's important to tell your story, and more importantly, continuously progress your story. For us, that was the need to go transparent with our diversity inclusion results. We, like any large organization, we have room for improvement, but I believe the big step you take to go forward is be open with where you are, where you're doing well, and also where you have room for improvement. So that's a little bit of how we think about it. So
I'd love to come back to diversity inclusion later, because I know that is a big deal for you, for your company, and for you personally. But let's go back for a second to the role of the CEO, because this is, as you say, it's changed. And some years ago, CEOs would have been reluctant to wade into some of these social, even almost political issues. It seems that part of this is that, as you say, that there's more trust in business than in government. So we've lost faith in government to lead the way. So, you end up with more of a kind of bottom up. If businesses can take care of affairs within their ecosystems, and maybe that adds up to profound change for society at large. Do you see it that way, or do we need government to get?
Yes, thanks, Adi. I've been encouraged over the last year or so with the way businesses have stepped up, and I personally believe CEOs do have a responsibility to engage on issues that are important to their employees, are important to their customers and their communities, and also to their investors. So business leaders do have a responsibility to lean in on these topics. At PwC, we've not shied away from that. We're talking regularly with our different stakeholders about these important needs. And that goes right to where I do believe the role has changed. Now, as with anything in life, there's nothing perfect. And the reality is it's not my job, and it's not, I don't believe, anybody's job to tell people what their politics should be. But it is important to let your stakeholders know, what do you stand for? Like, what does your brand, what does your organization, what does your purpose stand for? And that is an area where I see CEOs wading in more and more, even though it means you're not likely going to please everybody. But it is important to let people know where you stand. And we've tried to lead by example there. And again, it's not always you get 100% of your people, your customers, clients saying, great job. But you need to decide, is it important to let people know what you stand for?
How do you divorce that from politics, though? Because if you say, okay, look, we have some fundamental values, yeah, and they are about, they relate to climate change, they relate to immigration, they relate to, believing in science, fact-based decision-making. Those would have seemed pretty universal before 2016. Yeah. Now they're all sort of tinged with a political hue. So how do you handle that?
Yeah, so open, honest, candid conversation, first of all, is the way we handle it. I will say I worry deeply that we are sometimes living in a polarizing world where it's all or none, right or wrong. It's either or, as opposed to important dialogue and debate. So for us, on all of those topics that you mentioned, it's open dialogue. And it comes back to, what are your values? And so if I look at what our mission is, our mission is to help our clients succeed. Our mission is to give our people an incredible workplace where they can progress and achieve great things on their own, but as part of teams. In order to do that, things like immigration, massively important. Things like diversity and inclusion, massively important. Climate is massively important to our clients, so therefore it's massively important to us. So we try to stay focused on values, what's important to our clients, and what's important to our employees, and that drives the dialogue. Now, as we've seen, we're going to have different political regimes, not only in the United States, but across the globe. I don't believe you take an organization on a roller coaster ride up and down every time there's a change. You need to know what you stand for. If you're trying to please everybody, you'll please nobody. But if you have a North Star where you're sticking to, and for us, those hit the sweet spot. They're great for our clients, which means they achieve success. They're great for our people, and they're in return great for our firm. So that's how we try to do it. Oftentimes people ask, how do you try to navigate it? I actually try to reframe the question. Like, navigating it to me implies that you're trying to please everybody, which you're never going to do. I think you need to hit these issues straight on and say, why is something important to us? Like immigration, if we want the best talent to an organization like PwC, that's very important. And we talk about it. If we want to meet the needs of our clients, we want to look after our people. Immigration was important. So we didn't skirt the issue. We talked about it openly as to why it was important to us.
That's a good answer. So let's talk about sustainability specifically. How is PwC thinking about sustainability, both in the environmental sense and in the broader social meaning?
Yeah, so it's a major topic for us. One of the things that we believe in, and I tell people, I don't need to be the smartest person in the world. We get to interact with really smart people like you and CEOs all across the world. And we try to say, okay, what's working? What are people doing that's working? And for us, on the topic of sustainability and broader ESG, number one is to lead by example, right? It's hard to say you can advise a client if you're not doing it to yourselves. So the term like eating your own dog food, right? Like doing it to yourselves. And so for us, we have a net zero commitment by 2030. And we're on our way to progressing that. And if, as an organization that says we're purposeful, which we are, if we're not living that, it's hard to say we should, be on seminars like this, or staying with clients telling me why it's so important. So for us, it starts at home. It starts not only with climate and sustainability, but it goes broader to ESG. And for us, the sweet spot has been driving diversity and inclusion inside and outside the firm and driving upskilling. So for us, first, it is starting with home. In addition to that, we're doing more with our clients than we've ever done before. Like it is remarkable to see the momentum around sustainability. I'm encouraged. Like we all know, again, candidly speaking, it's been fits and starts over the years when we think about the topic of sustainability, ESG. What we're seeing now is more momentum than ever in our client base, and we are working with our clients where we are educating. We're helping with reporting. We're helping companies with strategy broader than around reporting. And I'm encouraged by that momentum we're seeing amongst our clients.
So the commitment to get to net zero, I'm sure a lot of companies, people who are watching us have been entertaining that themselves to get to net zero by whatever, 2030, 2050. What's the toughest part? As you lay that out, as you lay out that timeline, what's the most difficult part to get there?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. It's hard, right? I mean, this is our planet. Like, it's kind of hard to do. The biggest thing is balancing the short term with the long term, because there's a responsibility today to meet the needs of our people and our clients. At the same token, we need to think about the long-term viability for our broader stakeholders in our firm. So balancing the short term and the long term, that's one hard thing. The second thing that's really hard is helping our people to believe that we can do things differently. Now, the COVID environment, it was a horrific pandemic, to be clear. But as an optimist, always looking for silver linings, it began to show us how we can reimagine and do things differently. I'm sure many of the audience have heard, if you ask people last March in the United States and last January on a global basis, would we ever imagine this world where we're now sitting in our homes and getting work done and being productive? Not without its challenges, to be clear, but most of us would have said no way. But it gets to that second challenge of believing we can meet the needs of our people and our clients differently. And those are the two biggest challenges. There's dozens and dozens of tactics underneath of how we do that, but balancing short-term and long-term, and then also believing we can do things differently, two biggest challenges that we have.
By the way, if people have questions for Tim, I think you can, I don't know what you can do, but I think you can type them into the chat box or something like that, or you probably already know how to do that, but I'll try to get to some audience questions near the end of this. So, obviously sustainability to some extent is a cost, or is viewed as a cost. It also can create business opportunities. I'm wondering, what are some of those opportunities that you're seeing, and what are some of the new services then that you're trying to provide that are part of that?
Yeah, I do. Thank you again. I do worry sometimes that people see ESG, sustainability or even broader ESG through the lens of risk only. And clearly, if an organization isn't meeting the needs of its stakeholders, customers, employees, et cetera, investors, you run the risk of creating risk for your organization. That is very clear. And I would say for us, the first thing is we're working with our clients on risk mitigation, and that is helping them raise awareness, putting programs in place. We see significant opportunity for us to help our clients also on the opportunity side. So in our reporting side of our business, we're helping companies put in processes. Like, data is so important. It's such a critical part of going on this journey. We're helping our clients putting reporting and data, internal reporting, management reporting, external reporting. And that means putting in processes where we don't have as mature processes, for example, that we have in financial reporting. Most companies' financial reporting functions are very mature. They've been around for decades. They improve over decades. But the reporting around sustainability, one very large client said, Tim, we have 3 people who are junior staff who are putting together data that the CEO is then talking about. They're trying to mature their processes. We're also helping our clients benchmarking against peers and leveraging technology to do that. We innovated what we call an ESG Pulse app, which you can find on our website. It helps companies benchmark where they are, put in data dashboards. But also, Adi, then we're also helping our clients identifying where are the opportunities. Like, where are the opportunities to distinguish themselves? So, for example, if they're in somebody's supply chain, how do they differentiate themselves against others who are in the supply chain for them to win more business, for them to differentiate themselves? Because as companies all go to net zero, many of them are looking at their supply chain. And companies that are moving on their own net zero journeys, they then gain a competitive advantage in that supply chain versus those who don't. And we're doing quite a bit of work also helping companies with how do you differentiate when you're in somebody else's supply chain. So I'll just give you an example. One large financial service institution said to us, they have a big net zero commitment. A big way they look at it is who's in their supply chain. And if somebody in the supply chain is in the bottom third, that's going to pose risk. Somebody's in that top third, that's going to pose significant opportunity. And that's, so we're helping our clients both on reporting, risk mitigation, but also seizing those opportunities.
Okay, so we're getting into the ESG question, and I want to drill down on that a little bit. I think it's clear investors, or more and more investors, are looking closely at sustainability and ESG. We can argue whether it's enough, but what are actions that asset owners and managers could take to accelerate the corporate uptake of ESG initiatives within companies?
Yeah, thank you, Adi. So I would first acknowledge, again, as I did earlier, I do think over the last 10 years that there's been some fits and starts on the topic of ESG, and some have stayed very laser focused. But as a corporate world, there have been some kind of starts and stops, et cetera. When I left the World Economic Forum last year, the last time it was held, I left saying something feels different this time. Something feels different this time. And there was a clear momentum. And what I'm encouraged by is even through this pandemic, we have seen the majority of our clients still maintain the focus on sustainability, on net zero, and on the broader topic of ESG. When I saw the horrific murder of George Floyd, I saw companies moving in like they never did before. So I do feel like, as an optimist, we have significant momentum around this broad topic. Your question around what can asset owners do? First, keep up the pressure. I can tell you, sitting with many of the people you're investing in, people are listening, CEOs are listening, boards are listening, heads of investor relations are listening, CFOs are listening. Keep up the pressure. The second thing I would say is help companies navigate the short term and the long term. In the short term, a very real challenge is public companies feel the pressure to deliver quarterly returns. And that's important. As investors, you've made that clear, and certainly companies feel the pressure. But at the same time, listen to the long-term strategy, give credit where it's an appropriate, viable, credible long-term strategy, and help alleviate just a little bit of that pressure of short-term to the long-term. I'm encouraged by many of our clients who have legitimate plans, legitimate strategies to move to a better environment on ESG, but sometimes it's hard to see in the quarters. And therefore, if investors, asset owners can give that little bit of that help, put that a little bit more in balance, I think that could help quite a bit.
How comfortable are you with the state of ESG reporting these days? I mean, to what extent do you think the raters get it right?
Yeah, so I would say it's better today than it was last year, and it's better last year than it was a year before. We are progressing. There's no doubt about it. Do I think we've arrived? I don't. I think we're progressing in that direction. So what do I mean by that? When I look at ESG reporting today, for me, the benchmark is what we have in financial reporting. Now, it's taken over 100 years for our financial reporting system here in the United States and globally to mature. So you don't get there overnight. But the reality is, when we look at financial reporting, there's generally one set of standards. Or if you want to go globally, there's two sets of standards, FASB and IFRS. We're trending in that direction from ESG, but we don't have one or two set of standards. We're progressing. So I want to see that progress more. Also, when I look at the controls, the credentialing, the technology, the level of review and the discipline, we're progressing within the corporate world, but we have room for improvement there as well. So I think today, as a corporate community, we can make it a little bit easier for the people who are rating and looking at this if we put more rigor in the system, more confidence in the system, and as we migrate to common standards. And so that will be a journey. I actually like to call it an adventure. That will be a really good adventure that we go on. But in order to get to say, hey, I feel great about this, that's the journey we need to go on.
Yeah. So I'm going to go to audience questions in a second, but as I said earlier, I want to ask you to talk more about the D&I initiative at PwC. And I guess the question is, what are you learning about the best way to ensure, lasting improvements in the D&I work that you're doing?
So the first thing I would say to your audience is, I want to be clear, we don't have this all figured out. We have been on a 25-year journey, and since 2016, we put that journey on an accelerated pace. So since 2016, we have really doubled, tripled, quadrupled down on our journey. One of some of the things that we've learned, number one, data. We are massively focused on data. Myself and my leadership team, we are looking at data every every way you could cut it. We're looking at by line of business, by area, across our different businesses and geographies. And we're not just looking at the outcome. We're not just looking at where are we on representation, which is hugely important. I call that a little bit of the finished product. We're looking at it on hiring. We're looking at it on retention. We're looking at it on pay gap. We're looking at it on promotions, on turnover. And we're asking ourselves, because those are leading indicators, as to how well we're doing. So the first thing we've learned is data really matters. We believe it's absolutely important to have an annual strategic plan around DE&I that is reviewed with the board on a minimum an annual basis. Hugely important. The second thing we've learned is that the tone of the top matters. For us, back 4 years ago, we began to try to make it comfortable to talk about the uncomfortable. And for us, we identified at PwC 4 years ago, we were not comfortable talking about race, the real issues around race, the fact that Black professionals carried a PwC business card because if they got pulled over, they wanted to be able to show they could afford the car. Like, we weren't comfortable talking about that. And for 4 years, we've been trying to make that cultural, that it's okay to talk about these issues. And just a really quick story, Adi. In 2018, so 2 years into this part of our journey, we had one of our own, a young man by the name of Botham Jean. He was shot and killed in his apartment in Dallas by an off-duty Dallas police officer. That was a horrific tragedy. I had the privilege of speaking at his funeral. But what the silver lining that tragedy was, that morning, the next morning after he was shot, the firm didn't need me to give permission to talk about how we felt. After 2 years of practicing and learning how to talk about the uncomfortable all across the country, our people talked about it. And that for me told me we were making progress, because you didn't need the CEO or the senior partner to say it's okay to talk about it. After 2 years, it was okay. And I think that's what our country learned, our world learned after the horrific killing of George Floyd, which is we need to talk about it. So last point I'd make, transparency. I wrote a blog last month. I think it's really important that CEOs take the next step of being transparent. And to take a little bit of the pressure off, nobody at large, in no large company, has a perfect story yet. Transparency is so important. It's important to let your stakeholders know where they are, and it's important to put the self-imposed pressure on to get better. This past August, we went fully transparent with our DE&I data. It's on our website. I'll save people who are looking. If you want to find faults with where we are right now, you'll find them. What I can tell you is I feel that pressure now more than ever to get better and better and better. So that's a little bit of the lessons learned. Data, make it comfortable to talk about it, and transparency.
That's great. Okay, so let me take some questions from the audience. I don't know who has put them in, but I see the question. So here's one: How do the company's ESG values come into play when it comes to lobbying, the lobbying team? Does the company use the lobbying arm to support specific legislation that aligns closer to the company's ESG values?
So we have a PAC, as do most organizations, and I think it's really important that we talk openly about what the purpose of a PAC is. And that PAC is really important for us as we look to do things that are right for our business, which in turn are right for our clients. As we all know, PACs over the last 6 months, or even as you point out, Adi, over the last 4 years, but certainly over the last 6 months, have taken on a heightened sense. And one of the things that we do is we talk openly with our people, but this is where I go to where I worry about a world of, right, wrong, do, don't, this cancel culture that we have. And one of the things that's really important is, I'll give you an example, immigration. Like we do look at which elected officials stand for what we stand for on immigration. Now, does that mean we're going to agree with them on every single aspect of their policymaking? It doesn't. So the lens we try to apply is we first look for basic purpose and values. Our people, and that we sit down and we make donations to or contributions to under our PAC, are they following our basic values? And then we look at what issues are important to our people. And as an organization that has incredible diversity, immigration is important to our people, and it's important to serve our clients. And so we look at individual issues that help drive the business forward, which allows us to help our people and our clients.
So here's another question, which is about boards. The C-suite and the board's landscape looks very different, the questioner asks. So I guess the question is, And maybe what does your research show about how board membership and engagement needs to change in this new world where we are trying to take care of issues like climate change, economic inequity, racial justice, et cetera?
Yep. So a couple of things there, if you allow me. I wanted to the question. I first want to say I literally yesterday was looking at some data, and we saw more improvement in the Fortune 500 on racial diversity in the last 12 months than we've seen in any one given year. So there is progress being made. I will say boardroom diversity, which I know wasn't your direct question, but I want to take the opportunity. I would encourage every company just to make it happen. There is not a talent pipeline problem for boardroom talent. And whether it be, I know oftentimes I've heard like why we can't move as fast. It may be the size of the board. Expand the board. Like the company's not going to go out of business if you expand the board. It may make the meetings a little bit larger, but I would encourage every company. It's the easy, diversity, equity, inclusion is hard. The easiest or the least hard is get diversity at the board across every level, and don't let the size of the board or some of the traditional excuses get in the way. That would be my first words of encouragement. Now, yours was broader, role of the board, skill sets in the board. It is really important that boards have a set of skill sets that appreciates the expectations of society, the expectations of customers, employees, investors, and bring that perspective. I would argue today, at a board that relies on institutional investors for capital, retail investors for capital, if you don't have someone on the board that brings the lens of here's what's important to pension funds, institutional investors, retail investors, then I'd ask, how do you stay in touch with what's really important? If you don't have someone who appreciates the role of technology in issues like ESG, I'd ask, like, why don't we need that skill set? So I think it's a time for boards to really look at the skill sets that they have more than ever, and then also more engagement. I mentioned earlier, annual DE&I plan, annual ESG plan, and not just focus on risks, but where are the opportunities? So the board's role is evolving here. Our surveys show they're very interested in evolving this area, but quicker and faster is the name of the game here.
Yeah. All right. I think we have time maybe for one more quick question and quick answer. And somebody's asking about, the consulting industry with its, large amounts of travel expenses, air, hotel. So question is whether your 2030 net zero goal, to what extent it's supplemented by offset tactics, particularly in light of all this.
Yeah. So I was asked the question the other day by somebody else, a CEO, what is the role of offsets? I think when you look at purchasing offsets, I think that's an important part of someone's strategy. But again, if you're going to be credible, you need to do more than offsets. Like offsets are relatively easy. You buy them and you use them. I think what's really important is for every company to reimagine how they do business. And that's where we are. Like we are now looking at how do we reimagine the way we do business? No doubt about it. When you look at our biggest carbon footprint in the consulting and professional services world, it's travel. We are looking at every element, and COVID taught us we can meet the needs of our clients differently. So we're looking at not only our travel, we're looking at our office space with certifications, we're looking at our waste, we're looking at our training, how we deploy our talent, and all that goes in the pipe. It goes into the process that we're looking at. But I would just say, COVID again, horrible, horrible pandemic with incredible tragedies. It also taught us all we can reimagine how we work together, and we are taking advantage of that as we go on our net zero journey.
All right. Well, Tim, that was great. I appreciate your candor. I also appreciate your energy and optimism. So with that, I'm going to hand it back to Eliza.
Thank you so much. Good luck, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tim, and thank you, Adi, for closing out our day one with an excellent conversation. So I will just brief us on some housekeeping for day two. So this closes our first day of our fourth annual practice forum, but we look forward to reconvening here tomorrow at 9 a.m. Eastern time for another exciting morning of events. We'll hear about technology for people, planet, and profit. We'll hear about innovations in sustainable investing, sustainability marketing from our team, as well as from the Imagine organization on courageous collectives, business leaders driving action. So with that, thank you so much, and see you back here tomorrow morning. Bye-bye.